All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back. It is Wednesday at 5 p.m., January the 15th, and I am sending you this from my house tonight. I travel a little bit. I don't know how many times I'll be gone this semester, but last semester I was gone a lot. I was broadcast from different places. Um, so first off, you guys that are watching live, you guys that are going to be watching or are watching the recording, fabulous. This is a super, super, super important topic. It is the basis of the rest of the semester. If you ask anything about anybody that knows anything all about economics, you ask them what's it about, they're going to tell you supply and demand. And that's what this is. We're going to talk about supply and demand. I'm not doing everything with supply and demand. You got to make sure you do the modules also, because there's some things that I have to leave out because I have 1 hour now to teach you what it would normally take about 2 weeks in a classroom. So I'm going to try to do it, kind of fly through it in an hour. And I'm not doing, of course, we're not stopping doing practice problems and that sort of stuff. So that makes it a little bit easier. So, all right. So as I said last week, I always turn off my video because they told me that there's a lot of people that are on limited bandwidth, and video takes a lot of bandwidth. So I turn off the video there, not to hide my face, but to do that. So here we go. Without further ado, look that word up, ado. Let's get started here. All right, so this is this stuff that I'm getting into is actually about 20 to 25% of the multiple choice part of the AP exam. Supply and demand, this unit, and all the stuff I'm gonna be doing and adding on to it is all over the AP exam. And without this, you really can't do any of the free responses either. Well, there's a couple you could do, but anyways, it's the building block for the rest of the semester. And you're going to draw graphs or variations of these graphs many times this semester. So you want to make sure you get it down right here. So the first thing is we're going to talk about demand curves. We're going to talk about what a demand curve is. And where we're going here is we're going towards a market. We're going to talk about markets. And a market is just a mechanism that brings buyers and sellers together. It could be Walmart. It could be Amazon. It could be eBay. It could be a guy that's walking down the street and opens up his coat and says, "Hey, man, do you want to buy a watch?" If you're a potential buyer, he's a seller. That's a market. But generally what we do is in here we talk about organized markets, and that's what we're going to be drawing tonight. We're eventually going to get to a market. So let's start with the demand. Okay, demand is the definition of demand is the number of units of good or service that a buyer, so we're talking about the buyer here, is both willing and able. You have to want it and you have to be able to buy it. Okay, like I have no demand for Lamborghinis. They're not. I'm not able to buy it. Now, if they came in my price range, then I would be on the demand curve. But the key is you have to have a buyer that's willing and able to buy it at various price ranges. Okay, if you go to buy milk, and milk is $1.97, you go, okay, I'm gonna buy it. If it's 3.02 and you still say, well, I'll buy it, but I just don't want as much milk, $3.02, you're still on that demand curve. There's the price can vary and you're still on the demand curve. What would kick you off is if the price just got, out high, like, Lamborghinis. So, but keep that in mind, the buyers willing and able to buy at various prices. And we're talking about what happens at a specific price. Demand curves are downward slope, and demand goes down, demand goes down, down demand, down demand. Okay. Whenever you draw these curves, some couple things I really want to point out right off the bat is that if you don't label your axes, it is not a graph. And I pointed this out in my original live learning session. If you still haven't watched that, you need to watch that because there's some other hints on that that'll help you in this course also. So every time you draw one of these things, if I was just said, hey, draw a demand curve, and you did this, that is not a demand curve. Okay. If you did this, that is not a demand curve. In order to read a demand curve, you have to label it as a demand curve. And what we're going to end up doing here in this course is we're going to end up shortening everything to make it easy. We're going to just do P for price, Q for quantity, and then the downward slope of demand, D for demand. You can do that on the AP exam. Everybody knows what it is. Economists, this is how they draw them too. They don't write out the words price, demand, and quantity. Okay, demand curve is downward sloping. Okay, in your module, they'll talk a little bit about why it's downward sloping. Make sure you go back and you look at that and the different things about demand. Okay, if I take a specific point on a demand curve right here, this is what we call the quantity demanded. So there's a big difference between demand and quantity demanded. Quantity demanded is at a specific price, at one price. If I tell you that something's gone on sale and you were planning on buying two of them, your quantity was two, and the price goes down, you say, hey, now I want to buy three, your quantity changed. The demand did not change. When the price goes down, the quantity demanded goes up. Quantity demanded, not demand. The entire curve is demand. And I'm going through this very, very rapidly. Please make sure you're looking at this in the modules because it's going to spend a lot more time talking about that. What I wanted to get into today is I want to get into the shifters and things like that, okay? Because one of the things as we learned, I talked about this in the last live learning session about production possibility curves, I will always teach you a curve and then we're going to shift it, okay? Because shift happens, right? So what this is this, the one on the left here is an increase in demand. This is an increase in demand. Why is it an increase in demand? Because this was D and this was D1. It shifted to the right. Best way to actually show this, if you're just showing this, is to draw and show the shifts that the demand curve shifted to the right. The one on the left, the one on the right here is a decrease in demand. It's a decrease in demand. Why is it a decrease in demand? Because the demand curve moved to the left closer to 0, 0. So as we move closer to 0, 0, we're actually going that way. As we, on the one on the left here, an increase in demand, we're actually going that way. We're moving further away from 0, 0. So all semester long, when we do curves, increase right, decrease left, increase right, decrease left, right? You want to increase your grade, right? If you decrease it, you're going to be left out. You want to increase your grade, right? Increase right. If you decrease it, you're going to be left out. So decrease left, increase right, all semester long, every graph we switch is that, okay? All right, so what makes it shift? There's these things called determinants, okay? Some books will call them shifters. They're the reasons for the shift of the demand curve, okay? And I'm going to run through these kind of quickly here. And sorry about the noise in the background. Somebody's going down my driveway and it sends off all sorts of bells and warnings and things like that, so we know they're coming. Anyways, first determinant is consumer incomes. All right, and consumer income is just what it sounds like. It's how much money you're making. Who do you think buys more stuff, you or me? Probably me. Why? Because I have a job and I make more money. Some of you guys have jobs too, and you may make more than me. But for the most part, the higher income, the greater your demand for a product. Okay. So if your income goes up, then the demand curve shifts to the right. If your income goes down, the demand curve shifts to the left. You're going to buy less of everything at all prices. If your income goes down, you're going to buy more of everything at all prices, because I say we're talking about demand curves, if your income goes up. That's for most goods, and most goods we call them normal goods. Almost everything out there is a normal good. Every once in a while they'll throw a test question on about an inferior good. An inferior good is one that's the opposite effect. Okay, an inferior good is one that as your wealth goes up, you buy less of it. Okay, things like used like mobile homes, canned meat. You might go, oh no, I love canned meat. Spam or that. Well, that's means that if your income went up, you would actually buy more of that. But there's lots of goods out there that you buy less of. That's not. But there's goods out there that you buy less of it when your income goes up. And it's not true for everybody. Just because it may be true for one person won't be true for everybody either. So we can't say that this good isn't. They're not going to give you an example and say, is this an inferior good or a normal good? They're going to tell you, given that this good is inferior, and now you know that it works the other way around. That when the price goes up, the demand decreases or shifts to the left. That's an inferior good. For a normal good, when the price, I said price. I'm so sorry. When your income goes up, for an inferior good, you're going to buy less of that product at all prices. The demand curve shifts to the left. That's consumer incomes. Second determinant of demand is taste and preferences. This is real easy. If you prefer more, which way does your demand curve shift? If you prefer more, think about that. Which way does your demand curve shift? Well, it would shift to the right if you prefer more. If you prefer less, then it's going to shift to the left. Taste and preferences. This is why they advertise, by the way, to try to increase your demand for that good. Not your quantity demanded. because quantity demanded is a change in price. When they put something on sale, they're trying to increase your quantity demanded. Price of a complementary good. This is one of the harder ones here. Okay, price of a complementary good. First of all, a complementary good is one that goes with another. Milk and cookies, um, uh, peanut butter and jelly, green eggs and ham. Okay, those would all be complementary goods. Basically, when you buy one, you buy the other. They're complementary to each other. They complement. They go with each other. And I'm using the example here. I'm using is chips and salsa. Is my example. I'm using chips and salsa. And the way this works is notice that what I did here was I decreased the price. I went from P to P1. I decreased the price of chips. When I decrease the price of chips, notice the demand for chips does not change. What changes is the quantity demanded. When the price went down, we're like, ooh, I'll buy more of this now. Okay, it didn't change my desire to have chips. It just, I'm buying a greater quantity of chips because the price went down. Okay, but now you've got all these chips in your basket. And what goes with chips? Salsa. So what are you thinking? Now that you bought, because you bought a greater quantity of chips, so the decrease in the price of chips caused me to buy a greater quantity of chips. Now I've got all these chips in my shopping basket. What do? I go, ooh, I need salsa. So what happens is the demand for salsa shifts to the right. See, the price of the chips cause the demand for the salsa to increase. And of course, this will go the other way. If the price of chips goes up, then you're going to want to buy a lesser quantity of chips. Now that you're buying less quantity of chips, your demand for salsa would decrease or shift to the left. That's price of a complementary good. In a real classroom, what I would do now is I would stop and practice this. And I would do different things and we would shift and practice and that sort of stuff. But that's why I'm able to do this in an hour, basically. Okay, the next determinant is the price of a substitute. A substitute is just what it sounds like. You're substituting one for another. You're replacing one for the other. Public transportation with a car. Um, a baseball versus a football. Watching a professional football game versus a professional baseball game when they're overlapping at the same time. Sometimes the Braves and the Falcons play on the same day. The one they often use on the test is chicken and beef. Okay, I'm using cereal and Pop-Tarts. Cereal and Pop-Tarts. So here you go shopping and you look and you go, oh no, the price of cereal has gone up. Well, what happens to the demand for cereal when the price of cereal goes up? And the answer is nothing happens to the demand for cereal. What does change is the quantity demanded. Be careful of that. That is the number one trick question. That's about the only trick question we have in this course, is that when the price of that product changes, the quantity of that product changes, not the demand for that product. So back to my example here. So you go shopping, you go, oh no, the price of cereal went up. So you are going to buy less quantity of cereal. So now you're going, golly, but I still got to eat breakfast. So what happens is you get an increase in demand for Pop-Tarts because Pop-Tarts are a substitute for cereal. Maybe they're not for you, but for some people they are. So Pop-Tarts would be a substitute for cereal. So when the price of cereal went up over here on the left, when the price of cereal went up, you're going to buy less quantity of cereal. So that means you're going to buy something else. You get an increase in demand for Pop-Tarts. And I'm shifting that guy to the right. That's the price of a substitute. Next one, population. More people, more buyers. That's the way it is. More people, more buyers. That means the demand curve shifts to the right. More people, more buyers. This is more population. And of course, all of these go the other way too. Again, in my live class, I would, when I have weeks with them to go over this material, I would practice this. I said, what happens if the population decreases? And I would go back and say, what happens if the price of a substitute goes down? What happens if the price of a complement goes up? What happens if your consumer, what happens if somebody finds out that this product is making people sick? So demand curve would shift to the left, right? So go and practice these things and look at them and think about all those. And the last one is consumer expectations of price. If you expect the price to rise in the future, and you want that product, you're going to go buy it now. So if you expect, now it hasn't changed. That's the key here. If it changes, that's quantity demanded. Here, you expect it to rise. If you expect it to rise, then you're going to go out and you're going to buy it now, so the demand curve would shift to the right. If you expect it to go on sale next week, you're going to wait. You're not going to buy it today. The demand curve is going to shift to the left. So it's expectations about price. It hasn't happened yet. If it happens, you move along the curve. You don't shift the curve. And that is your determinants of demand. Okay. Big difference between demand and quantity demanded. Quantity demanded is whenever there's a change in price and you move along the curve. Demand is there's a change in one of the determinants. Actually, more. Could be more determinants. One, we'll just say one here, but could be more. But in this class, we'll always isolate one thing at a time. Changing one determinant, which is what I just went over, those 6 things I just went over. And this shifts the curve. So the one in this one over here, you move along the curve, determinants, you shift the curve. Make sure you know that. And by the way, you don't need to memorize these determinants. It doesn't mean to say that another way. You don't need to memorize. You don't need to be able to list them. They're never going to say list the 6 determinants. They're going to give you a scenario, and you have to understand, oh, that's taste and preferences. Oh, that's price of a complement. Oh, that's price of substitute. That's consumer incomes. That's expectation price. You don't have to memorize then list these things, but you have to be able to pick it out of a lineup. Okay, like a newspaper article comes out, you should be able to say, oh, that's a determinant of blah. So anyway, moving on. All right, next is supply. Okay, supply. So now we've got the demand side. Now we're going to the supply side. The supply side, once you really understand demand, supply is a little bit easier. Okay, it's the exact same thing from the seller's side. So it's the number of units of a good or service that a seller, they have to be willing to sell it to you, and they have to be able to. The tricky thing about the able thing here is, can they earn a profit out of it? Okay. Ford is not able to sell you a car for $2,000. They're not able, because it costs probably $2,000 in labor alone to make a car. And then you got all those other expenses too. So they're not able to sell you a car. They may be willing to, but they're not able to. And this is also at various prices. So it's the number of units of a good or service that a seller is willing and able to sell at each of the various prices. And we're talking again various prices. The supply curve is upward sloping. Okay, the supply curve is upward sloping. So when I draw my supply curve, again, always label the axes, price and quantity, supply. Okay, the way you remember this, and you don't have to write it out every time you read it, the way you remember this is it's sup. It goes up. Supply goes up. Supply goes up. Up, up, up. Supply. It shoots up to the sky, right? And again, normally when we do this, we're not going to write out the word supply just because of time. And nobody does. Economists don't. They label this just good old supply. I mean, just good old S. And notice that I'm labeling it up here in the upper right-hand corner. Okay. When I drew my demand curve, I labeled it. Let me draw real quick. That's P. I labeled my demand curve. I labeled it over here. We always draw them over here on the right side of the axes over here, the horizontal axes, because it's kind of out of the way. Then when we start putting them together, we're going to see what we're doing here. All right. Supply curve shift. Supply curve shift. Okay. Increase right, decrease left. Increase right, decrease left. So this one over here is an increase in supply. This one here is an increase in supply. The one on the left is an increase in supply. I really should probably switch these. The one on the right is a decrease in supply. How do I know it's a decrease? Because I'm moving towards 0, 0. It's going that way. The one on the left, it's going that way. That's an increase in supply. When you're moving away from 0 and 0, it's an increase in supply. When you're moving towards it, that's a decrease in supply. All right. But again, increase right, decrease left. Always shifting to the right, shifting to the left. Do not use the words up and down, okay? Because this one here, the supply curve, it looks like it's going up, but you actually have a decrease in supply. So if you said supply went up, I don't know what you're talking about. So you have to say decrease in supply, increase in supply. Same thing with demand curves. Decrease in demand, increase demand. We don't say up and down. So for supply, what you want to think about is this. Anything that makes it easier for the seller to produce or cheaper for them to produce shifts the supply curve to the right. They're going to give you more. If it's easier to produce or cheaper for them to produce, they're going to give you more. If it's harder for them to produce or more expensive to produce, they're going to give you less. Okay, so if you remember that when you're going through these determinants, you'll be able to figure those out pretty quickly here. Okay, so the first determinant, and this is one of the bigger ones that they use on the AP exam, is resource prices. So what do I mean by resources? If you watched my video last week, or you should know what I'm talking about. This is our land, labor, or capital. That's your resources, also known as factors or factors of production. Okay, we learned that last week. So if the price of land or labor or capital goes down, it's now cheaper to produce. Labor is a huge cost for businesses. Labor is a huge cost for businesses. And when wages get driven up, they're not able to sell as much of the product. And when I say able, because they have to earn a profit. They have to be able to pay their workers and still sell the product. Okay. And so labor is a huge thing. And so what ends up happening is if the price of labor goes up, if this was a business and this was their supply curve, okay, everybody look at that. Is that a supply curve? And the answer is no, it's not a supply curve. Why not? And the answer is I didn't label the axes. If the labels are not labeled, if the axes are not labeled, it's a nothing. That's a nothing. I got my Q axes labeled, but not my P axes. Both axes have to be labeled or it is a nothing. You lose the points. Okay. So if labor prices go up, then the business is not going to be able to supply as much. They just can't afford to produce the same quantity at the various prices. So there's going to be a decrease in supply. They're going to sell less. And people go, oh, no, they won't. No, they won't. They've got to be able to earn a profit. They've got to be able to earn a profit. They'll just raise prices. No, they can't raise prices. We're going to find out why in a few minutes. You can't just raise, businesses can't just raise prices. Okay, and we'll find out why in a minute. All right, so far we've got resource prices. Second one is technology. If new technology comes out, it's easier to produce. Supply curve shifts to the right. If technology goes bad or gets destroyed, then the supply curve shifts to the left. Usually we don't lose technology, but you can lose, I don't know, you can use the knowledge of doing things. I don't know. I'm not sure how that would work. But anyways, so increased technology shifts to the right, decreased technology shifts supply to the left. Next one, another one, big one that they'll talk about a lot in this class is taxes. Taxes, and this is taxes on the business. So you're charging the business more money, supply curve shifts to the left. If you're charging the business less money, supply curve shifts to the right. So taxes decrease supply. Businesses, and this is again something that people don't understand. If you put a tax on a business, you're in effect raising their cost of production. They are not going to be able to sell as much of that product because they can't just pass that tax on to us. We'll learn about that later on in this class. It's called tax incidence. Who's actually paying the tax? Next is a subsidy. A subsidy is a payment to the company to produce. All right. They did that during COVID. During COVID, the seller, the businesses, the government wanted more COVID vaccines. So what they did, they went and told the sellers, for every COVID vaccine that you manufacture, we'll give you money. And they did that, and that caused the supply of COVID vaccines to increase or shift to the right. They wanted those COVID vaccines out there. It was also a huge profit motive for businesses too, because not only are they selling them and the insurance companies are paying for them, the government's also paying for them too. So it was a huge profit motive for them to do that. All right. Next determinant is expectations. Just like the expectations for demand, if you are a buyer and you expect the price to rise in the future, you're going to want to run out and buy it right now. But for the seller, if they think they can sell it at a higher price in the future, what are they going to do right now? They're not going to sell it. They're not going to want to sell it right now. So you're going to get a decrease in supply. If they expect the price to rise, they'll stop selling it now, knowing they can sell it to you at a higher price later on. And of course, if they expect the price to fall in the future, then they're going to want to go out and sell it to you right now. And the last one is number of sellers. This is just like population. More sellers, supply shifts to the right. Less sellers, supply curve shifts to the left. All right, now that we know supply and demand, and again, I've done this in 26 minutes. This would normally be 3 or 4 days in my class. We would practice this. We would practice the determinants. We would learn and really spend some time on this. So you want to make sure you spend time on this. But once we've done this, we can now put together our first market. A market consists of an upward sloping supply curve, a downward sloping demand curve. And what you do is you then, and of course your axes are labeled P and Q. What you then do is you then find this point right here. At that point, the quantity supplied, okay, which comes from the supply curve, is equal to the quantity demanded. This is what we call equilibrium. And from that, what we then do is we draw dotted lines down to the axes to show the quantity. Quantities are always labeled outside the axes. If you put your Q there, it's wrong. Okay, because it's not, this is not a math graph. This is explaining a scenario. This is explaining a situation. What this situation is telling us is at whatever price this product is, this is how much the buyers will buy. This Q down here is how much the buyers will buy, and it's how much the sellers will sell. It's the quantity demanded that the buyers want to buy at that price. And it's the quantity supplied the sellers want to sell at that price. And of course, you then do dotted lines out here to the price. Remember, I told y'all in my introductory live learning session, if you haven't watched that, please go back and watch that. That dotted lines are never accepted in this course, except for when you're showing points going to the axes, right? So if I said, show me an increase in demand, and you did this, and then your next one, you did this, that is not a line. That second one is not a demand curve. I don't care that you labeled a demand curve. It's not a demand curve. It has to be a dotted line. The only time we do dotted lines is when we're trying to show an equilibrium price or quantity. Dot, 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 to the axes. Okay. The other thing, another major gotcha here is, again, always label your axes outside. If you did this and you label that P and you put it right there, not accepted. Okay, this is how they grade on the AP exam. This is how I will grade. I've sat in many meetings about this, and textbooks don't do it. You're not going to do it either if you're going to get the points. P's and Q's are labeled outside. They're never labeled right here on the inside either. Okay, so this would be a market in equilibrium. When it's in equilibrium, since they're equal, there's no incentive to change. Everybody's happy. Okay, it provides information to economic decision makers, and it guides it provides information to us, buyers. It provides information to the sellers, right? And it also allocates resources. It tells us where to spend the resources. Okay, if we are willing and able to buy a basketball, let's say basketballs are $25. Okay, say the price is equal to $25, and the quantity that's bought any given day from a store is 12 basketballs. Okay, what's happening is that Q is actually quantity demanded, and it's also quantity supplied. They wouldn't sell if they weren't willing to. We wouldn't buy it if we weren't willing to. And that tells them keep buying basketballs. If they're selling 12 a day or 12 a month or whatever, that tells them keep buying basketballs because they can sell 12. They're not going to try to sell 13 because we're only willing and able to buy 12. So they want to have 12 on stock each day. They don't care about having 13 on stock. They want to have 12. And you're like, but wouldn't they rather sell more? Of course they'd rather sell more, but not at that price of $25. Okay. The only way they would want to sell more than 12 is if the price went up, because then they move along their supply curve. They move along, not shift, I'm sorry, they move along the supply curve up to the right. So price dictates this, and it tells us how many they're willing and able to sell. And this is what I mean. They can't just raise the price. I'm going to show you that in a few minutes here. Okay. All right. I'll come back to that later on. Okay. So what happens next is, what if one of the determinants of demand changes? So what you would do, the question would say, given a market in equilibrium. So what you would do is you draw a market in equilibrium. You'd mind your P's and Q's, upward slope in supply, SUP goes up, downward slope in demand. I've seen many students switch those two and get it wrong. Then you show me where your equilibrium quantity is, and you show me where your equilibrium price is. Now you've got a market in equilibrium, meaning it's happy, it's going to stay where it is. QD equals QS, everybody's happy. But then something happens. One of those determinants occurs. Consumer incomes go up or down. Price of a complement goes up or down. Price of a substitute goes up or down. Expectations about the price. Maybe we expect the price to go up. Maybe this is a hurricane goes through the Gulf, and everybody has to evacuate the wells, the oil wells in the Gulf, and so we're not producing oil. And since we all know that when there's not as much oil out there, what happens to the price? It goes up. So what do we do today? We run out and buy it. So if you expect the price to go up, it goes up. Anyways, so any one of those 6 determinants. So let's say that I put down here, if there's an increase in demand. Okay, for whatever reason, it could be any one of those 6 determinants that I listed earlier. And the question would have you start off at equilibrium, and this is either multiple choice or free response, and then they give you a scenario, and you need to recognize it as an increase in demand. They're not going to say, and the demand curve increases, or the demand curve shifts right. They're not going to give you the answer. You got to understand these determinants and say, hey, that's a demand curve shift, not to be confused with a supply curve shift. So now, not only do you need to know the determinants of demand and know the determinants of supply, you got to be able to tell the difference. So if I tell you that taxes increased, which curve does it shift? That's the supply curve, right? If I say expectations about price, it actually shifts both, so they'll never give that on the test. If they did, they would have to say expectations that the consumer pays. So I don't think they'd ever word that. I was on the committee, test development committee, and we had this discussion one time. We wanted to use expectations, and we were like, no, we can't, without just giving the question. But you need to understand the determinant. So right here, I'm just telling you there's an increase in demand. So I'm telling you it's an increase in demand. Super simple. What happens here? That would shift the demand curve to the right. Well, what happens is the immediate effect is that, sorry, my phone is going on. The immediate effect is that sorry, I got to silence my phone. Okay, there we go. The immediate effect is that the seller doesn't know there's an increased demand. Maybe this is something happened and we just decide, hey, suddenly we want to buy more of this product. Seller doesn't know that. Okay, the seller doesn't know that this is about to happen, so they don't know to raise the price. So what happens is immediately the quantity demanded is actually way out here, right? The seller realizes that we really now want this product, and they go, oh man, they really want this product. So if you're a seller and you know that people really want the product you sell, what do? You raise the price. And then they start to raise their price. And as they raise their price, they're now willing and able to sell more, because their profit is going to be better off as they raise the price, right? We don't actually know that for sure about profit, but that's the idea behind it. But we're willing and able to buy less now. Not less than Q, but less than way out here, whatever this was. Okay, and what ends up happening is we end up at a new equilibrium point, and our new equilibrium point, let me label it here. Okay, so we end up right here at Q1, greater quantity, at a higher price. So what happens is when the determinant demand shifts to the right, the answer is price increase and quantity increases. We buy a greater quantity increases at a higher price. And you say, wait, price doesn't shift the demand, doesn't shift the demand curve. You're right, it didn't shift the demand curve. What shifted the demand curve is one of the other determinants. Could be a price of a complement, price of substitute, consumer incomes, tastes and preferences, expectations about price. And every time I try to name all 6 of them, I can always remember 5, and it's never the same 5. There's one that I'm missing, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. You never have to learn on a list. So that would be an increase in demand. Anytime you get an increase in demand, this will always be the answer. Don't memorize it because you're going to have to be able to draw it. For the free response test, you're going to be able to draw it. For the multiple choice, you're going to want to draw it. You're going to want to have a piece of paper. When you take the multiple choice questions in this class, you're going to want to have a piece of paper next to you, and you're going to want to draw this stuff out. Okay. What if one of the determinants of supply changes? Well, let's find out. Start off at equilibrium. Okay. What happens to equilibrium? So you got to start off at equilibrium. Upward slope in supply, downward slope in demand. Find out the equilibrium quantity. Find out the equilibrium price. Now we're going to change our determinants. We're going to change demand. Let's go ahead and decrease demand. So I'm going to go ahead and decrease supply. I'm sorry, supply. I'm going to decrease supply. Okay. So decrease in supply is to the left, increase right, decrease left, right? Correct. What's going to happen is immediately at that old price, we're no longer buying it. Okay. So what's going to happen is, I'm saying that wrong. What's going on there? I'm trying to make sense of it here so it makes sense in your brain as opposed to just showing what happened there. Oh, no, at that old price, I'm sorry, at that old price, we're still out at Q. At the old price, we're still way out at here at Q, right? See, at this old price right here, we're still at Q. And so what they're going to do is they're going to go, hey, yeah, if you really want this, then you're going to have to pay me more. And they're going to, because the supply curve decreased, and as they raise the price, we want less of it. So we end up buying less because it's a higher price. Let me erase this right there. We're going to buy less of it because it's a higher price. So the price caused us to decrease our quantity that we wanted. So the increased price. So the answer here is the price increase and quantity decrease. Notice how I'm drawing arrows out here, by the way. If you know, I didn't point this out to you. Anytime you shift a curve here, I don't draw arrows in here. I draw them out here showing the change in price. It's probably best. Okay, let me go back and do this just kind of cleanly here. Okay, this is an increase in demand. It's probably best, and it's just I'm old school, and I've never done this way, and so I don't demonstrate it in class, but I try to encourage my students to do it the correct way. So it's probably best when you're drawing these, you got start off at equilibrium. When you increase your demand to kind of just do this, okay, and then go to your new equilibrium here and do this for sure. So you've got lots of arrows showing what's going on here. You're showing here that the demand curve shifted to the right. You're showing here the quantity increase and the price increase. The reason why I tell students to do this is, what if you're in a hurry and you don't have these arrows here, right? And you accidentally you labeled your axes up here as P. Okay, so you did a good job. You're doing good so far. And you did this. You're in a hurry. Now you've got 2 P's. Okay, I don't know which is which. I don't know which is the initial and which one's the new one. And the reader is not going to go over here and do this. The reader's not going to say, well, this is Q1, so this must be P1, because I have seen many a student that's done that, which is wrong. That is wrong. I've seen many a student label this one P1 and this one Q1. They have no idea what they're doing. Okay, so the grader will not fill it in for you. But I'm telling you, if you do that, now we know. That's supposed to be an arrow. This pen doesn't write real well on my computer. It's just it's the best I can do. Now we know you meant that the second one is the prime one. It's kind of like an insurance policy. So always label these things and always put your arrows showing the shifts and your arrows showing the changes in prices and quantities. Okay, and all that stuff in between that I did, all this stuff right here with the red, the dot thing here, don't do that. Okay, that's not just do the, in other words, that shouldn't be there and that shouldn't be there. Okay, that should just be, should look like this. Blue. I was just showing you what was going on. Okay, and then the same thing when we did the supply curve, all this junk here in the middle, this green junk here in the middle, don't do that. All right, so that's what I did here was I did an increase in demand. I did a decrease in supply. What you're going to want to do is go in and do a decrease in demand and an increase in supply. There's 4 scenarios. You should be able to draw all 4 of them and then tell me what happened to price and quantity. Don't memorize it. Don't memorize it. You're going to have to be able to draw it. You have to be able to draw it in this course. That's what it's all about. These graphs are the key. Drawing graphs is the key to this course. Okay. Last semester was my first semester teaching online. I taught for 32 years in the classroom. Last year was my first semester online, and I was shocked at how many students did fairly well in the multiple choice and then just completely bombed, like 17s and 12s. I had one person made a 2 on a, no, 1 and 2. There's a 4, made a 4 on a free response test. They missed everything except for they put their name on it, and they made a big graph. Okay. And the reason why is they didn't really understand what they were drawing. They were doing okay on the multiple choice, but they didn't understand what they were drawing. These graphs are telling you a story, and then drawing them correctly to tell that story is very, very important. So go in and practice all of these dudes here. Increase demand, decrease demand, increase supply, decrease supply. Okay. Again, I'm rushing through this. I hate that I only have an hour to do this, but next week I got to go to a new topic. Okay. Otherwise I won't get the whole semester in because I only have few weeks to get the whole semester in, right? All right. Next thing is I want to teach you about something called consumer surplus. Okay. So consumer surplus works like this. So here's the quantity, here's the price, and I have an upward sloping supply. And for this one here, by the way, I'm going to draw it all the way to the axes. Normally, when we draw these guys, we don't draw them all the way to the axes. Notice this. We don't draw them all the way to the axes. And there's a reason for that. And you'll learn this back in about 3 or 4 weeks. You'll learn why. Okay. For the demand curve, it's pretty obvious. Okay, if I drew a demand curve all the way to here, that's saying that at that price at a price of $1, my quantity demanded would be 0, right? Well, at $1.01, am I going to suddenly have a demand? Yes, I will. But technically, at that point, you have no demand, so we don't run it all the way to the axes. That's just I'm sorry, that's a supply curve. What in the world? Upward slope of supply. Okay, supply curve. Let's look at it from supply curve standpoint. Okay, at a price of say $1, they're not willing to sell you any, right? Well, in reality, let's just wait till we get later on in the semester for this. Just trust me. Just trust me. We don't normally draw them all over the axes, but when we're teaching consumer producer surplus, we do. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do downward slope in demand, down demand, supply. Okay, I'm going to start off at equilibrium. So this market right here is at equilibrium. There's my quantity, and there's my price. Okay, so what's going to happen is, let's suppose that you've been out running and you're really, 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 really thirsty, and you decide you want to go buy a Powerade. You want to buy 1 unit of Powerade. Based on this demand curve, what this demand curve is telling us is for a quantity of 1, you would actually be willing to pay $3. I'm just putting numbers into it. Don't ever make up numbers unless the question gives you numbers, but I have to give you numbers to explain this right here. You'd be willing to pay $3 for that Powerade. When you walk into the store, the price is not $3. In fact, the price is only $1. Well, you're willing to pay 3, so how much are they going to charge you? They're going to charge you 1 because they don't know you're willing to pay 3, right? So the difference between the price they charge, the $1, and the price you're willing to charge right here is called consumer surplus. It's surplus that you're getting extra over beyond what you were willing to pay for it. It's called consumer surplus. And let's suppose you're really, really thirsty. You go, blah, 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 blah. You drink that down and you say, gee, I want another one. Maybe they're small Powerades. You want another one. You want a second one. Well, because of what we call the law of demand, which again, please make sure you're watching the modules. Don't just depend on what these live learning sessions. Watch the modules. We'll talk about the law of demand. Because of the law of demand, when the price decreases, right, then you're willing to buy more. So you're at a lower price than $3, you'd be willing to buy a second one. And so you're willing to buy a second one. How much are they going to charge you? Well, you're willing to pay $2 for it, but they're only going to charge you $1. they're only going to charge you $1. So the difference between the price that you're willing to pay, the $2, and the price you have to pay, the $1, is the consumer surplus. And we fill in this whole area here. Okay, and then finally, when we get to the last one, if I could somehow charge you by the SIP, I could charge you for this SIP and then this SIP and this SIP and this. But I don't. We charge for whole units. This also is part of the consumer surplus. So this whole area right here, everything above price to the demand curve, that whole area right there is called consumer surplus. Okay. And when you do this, you're not going to label it like I just did. Okay. I'm having to do it because of the way the way I'm teaching it. Okay. But I'm going to show you how you would draw it if they said draw this for a test. Okay. What you would do if they said draw this for a test, they would say draw a market in equilibrium. Okay. We all know how to draw a market in equilibrium now. Quantity, price, upward slope in supply, downward slope in demand. There's a market in not yet. There's a market in equilibrium. Now they say show the area of consumer surplus, either label it or shade it in or something like that. Well, to do it, we want to go and run that over the axes and that over the axes. And what you do is you just do this. You do a big CS. Okay. Ideally, the AP exam is probably not going to have you label it. The AP exam is going to make you shade it. Okay, I'm going to tell you one of our problems later on says label it. Okay, I don't like labeling. I don't write the problems for our course, but shading would be like this. If you shade it in the consumer surplus, shade the entire thing in, right there is not good enough. You got to make sure you get all the way over to the corners. So that would be shading the consumer surplus. Okay. Well, what happens is we also have this thing called producer surplus. Producer surplus, start off a market in equilibrium. Read your P's and Q's. This is a market in equilibrium. Be careful. Take the time to go around the clock. I always tell my students, take time to go around the clock. Is this axis labeled? Is this labeled as a supply curve? It's upward sloping. Is this a supply curve? Is this one labeled as a demand curve? Is this axis labeled? And do we have the equilibrium quantities and prices labeled with little dots going to them? Now I've done it. The idea here is you walked in the store and the price of that product was $1. And you're like, sucker, I would have paid $3 for it. You walk out of there all happy because you only paid $1. Well, in fact, they would, for that first unit, they would have sold it to you for 50 cents. So what we end up getting is you end up getting this area down here, everything above supply curve. I'm not going to go through the whole thing on it, but because it works with 2 units, 3 units, and so forth. Everything above supply curve to the price is what we call the producer surplus. Okay. And we label, by the way, we label consumer surplus as CS. Okay. But this is producer surplus. So we're going to label this one as PS. So we can do this. PS. Producer surplus. It's everything above the supply curve, the demand curve, everything below price. No. It's everything above supply to price, or it's everything below price to the supply curve. I apologize. I looked at the clock and started to panic, and so I lost my words there for a second. So producer surplus, everything below price to the supply curve, because it's the producer is the supply curve, right? Consumer surplus, everything above price to the demand curve. And again, if you can shade it in. If you really want to overkill, you can do that. It's PS, producer surplus. No. Panicking about time because I'm not going to get through it all, which is fine. It just means I'll pick it up next week. This is not producer surplus. This is consumer, and my pen just broke. This is consumer surplus. There we go. My pen just broke, so my good side is gone, so we'll see how it works now. Okay, so we got consumer surplus and producer surplus. When we put them together, again, when we put consumer producer surplus together, we get what's called total surplus. Yeah, this one doesn't write it. This side doesn't write it well in this pen. Total surplus is consumer and producer surplus combined. So if they said label your total surplus or shade your total surplus, it would be all the consumer surplus plus all the producer surplus. That would be total surplus. Oops, that's too high. Gotta stay in my lane there, man. Okay, there we go. So that would be total surplus. That's going to come into play later on in the course. Right now, not really something you need to worry about. The total surplus. I don't think the test is going to, this unit is going to ask anything about total surplus. Okay, let me hit this real quick. Sometimes markets have a shortage where they have a surplus. Shortage occurs when the price is too low. Okay, so right here is the situation. The market always wants to go here. It always wants to go to equilibrium. That's where markets want to go, is to equilibrium. But if the seller sets the price too low, okay, because remember, they don't know what price we're willing and able to pay. What happens is if they set the price down here, then they're willing and able to sell a quantity way out here. The quantity supplied is way out here. But unfortunately, at that price, we're only willing to buy. I got to read the graph. What's this one right here? This graph is the demand curve. At this low price, at the low price, we want a whole lot out of it. This is the quantity demanded. But at that low price, they're not willing to sell us as much. This is the quantity supplied. So what you've got a situation is where the quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. That's the definition of a shortage. There's a shortage in the market because we want it more, quantity demanded, than they want to sell to us, quantity supplied. That's the definition of surplus. Shortage. So if they ask you to define a shortage, you could literally just say QD greater than QS. That's the definition. Okay. And there's going to be a question on this. They're going to ask about shortage or surplus, and you have to say QD is greater than QS for a shortage. For a surplus, it's the other way around. For a surplus, the price is too high. Oh, by the way, what's going to happen in this market? Okay, they're going to realize that there's a shortage and they're going to raise the price. Okay. Now, in reality, guys, let me talk about this real quick. Okay, this happened during COVID. There was a toilet paper shortage. Okay, and we're not going into why it happened, but there's a long story behind it. I can show you all the supply and demand behind that. But there's a toilet paper shortage, and businesses did not raise the price. Okay, Walmart did not raise the price of their toilet paper. Kroger did not raise the price of their toilet paper. And the reason being is that's not all they sell. The people who manufacture the toilet paper did raise the price. The people who manufacture toilet paper raised their price, but Walmart and Kroger did not raise their price because there's a difference between economics and marketing. That is a bad marketing move because we have to have toilet paper. And if they raise the price because there's a shortage, then we all get mad at them and we want to shop somewhere else. They're worried about selling other things. They want to sell, eggs and milk and sodas and chicken and cereal and all that too. And if they raise the price in toilet paper, we get mad at us. We'll take all that business elsewhere. That's marketing. Okay. But in reality, if it was a true free market, the price of toilet paper should have gone up. And by the way, it did eventually. It did eventually go up because with the price of the manufacturers were raising the price, so they had to raise the price, but everybody was kind of doing it in the ballpark. So nobody really get mad at it, except for the manufacturers, which we really can't mad at them either because there was reason. But anyway, so what would happen is the market would eventually, price would go up to equilibrium. So if there's a shortage in the market because price is too low, quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, then eventually the market goes back to equilibrium if left alone. Okay, we'll talk about that later on too. Okay, in this case, we've got a surplus. Okay, we've got a surplus right here. Why do we have a surplus? Because the quantity supplied, they at this high price, they want to sell way out here. But we're like, yeah, we don't want this stuff. Our quantity demand is way back here. So what you've got is you got a situation where quantity supplied is greater than quantity demand. And by the way, you can also say quantity demanded is less than quantity supplied. They're the same thing. So you can say it either way. Okay, just like in this one over here, instead of saying quantity demand is greater than quantity supplied, you could have said quantity supplied is less than quantity demanded. Doesn't matter which order you say it, just as long as you've got them the right way. In this case, the quantity supplied is lower, right? The quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied. On a surplus, the quantity supplied here and here is greater than the quantity demanded. Okay, so what's going to happen in the market? They're not selling the product. So what are they going to have to do? They're going to have to lower the price, and we're going to end up back in equilibrium. So markets will always take care of them. They'll shift and they'll go back to equilibrium. And there's not a shift here. This is a market that's not in equilibrium. If the price is up here at this P right here, this market is not in equilibrium. Equilibrium is when the price would be down here. So it's not in equilibrium. So the market will eventually, if left alone, and I say if left alone because sometimes we're talking about the government getting involved in this, and they're not allowed to. And that's when you create eternal surpluses or shortages in markets. We'll talk about those coming up here. In fact, that's what we're going to do right now. I've got 5 minutes. I probably won't finish this, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce it here because it is part of one of the activities coming up in this next unit. And some people are getting close there. All right, so the bottom line is government intervention in a market that is efficient. And the interventions we're going to talk about throughout the semester is taxes, subsidies, price controls, which we're going to talk about right now, or quantity controls, which also going to go with what we're talking about right now. But we're going to talk about all these throughout the semester. They're going to decrease the allocated efficiency. And you don't know what that word means, allocated efficiency. Basically, allocated efficiency is going to decrease total surplus. It's going to decrease either consumer or producer surplus or both. Okay, we're no longer going to be efficient. The markets are no longer efficient. What I always tell my students, in other words, if a market's efficient, the government gets involved, they screw it up. That's the bottom line. And it is true. It's an economic reality. Okay. Governments tend to screw up markets if the market's inefficient. Okay. Now, how do we know it's inefficient? That's the key here. You got to know if it's efficient or inefficient. Okay. So let me just show you this real quick. And I'll do one of them and then I'll have to stop and then I'll pick it back here again next week. Okay. So I'm going to put in what's called a price ceiling. So the first thing we got to do is we got to draw a market in equilibrium. We're going to have our upward sloping supply, downward sloping demand, and this is a P over here. This market's in equilibrium. Everybody's happy. QD equals QS. The market is fine. Then the government's going to come in and say, wait. No. That price is too high. People can't afford this product. We want this price to be lower, right? So what they do is then they would put something called a price ceiling. A price ceiling is a maximum price that the seller can sell for. They're telling the price you have to sell the seller. This is the maximum you can sell. Okay. Ceilings are below equilibrium. And I'm going to label this as PC for price ceiling. Ceilings are below equilibrium. It sounds like I'm saying it wrong, but no, ceilings are below because where does the market want to go? It wants to go right here to this price P, but the PC has got to be lower than P because this is a ceiling is a maximum price. Well, you now know enough economics to tell me what's going to happen. At that low price, we're suddenly like, yeah, baby, I want to buy a lot of this product. But unfortunately, at that low price, the sellers are like, yeah, no, ain't going to happen. One of the most famous examples of this is rent control. For a period in the 80s, the 70s, and the 80s, governments across the country, local governments across the country, were putting in rent control because housing is too expensive. Housing is too expensive. People can't afford houses. And they put in rent control in cities like Chicago, New York was big time rent controls. If you watch Friends, some of those places are actually still under rent control. They took it away, but they grandfathered it in. So if you had a building under rent control, it stayed the same. In other words, you were a tenant in rent control. They couldn't raise the rent on you. Well, what happened was there wasn't enough housing. Suddenly, what happened was people that had these high rises converted them from housing to office space. They decreased their quantity. Okay, they decreased. Just looked at my graph. I got to be more careful. I apologize. I am not with it tonight. It's QS. They decrease the quantity that they are willing to sell. They're like, yeah, I'm not going to, at that low price, I'm not willing to sell you or rent a house to you. And what that did was it led to a huge, you tell me, QD is greater than QS. It led to a huge shortage in the markets. It is 6 o'clock. I have to stop here. I will pick it up next week here with floors. Okay. And then I'm going to talk about deadweight loss and another important thing. And we'll continue on with the next part of this unit. Please, any questions you all, send me an email. Make sure you're doing the modules. keep watching the live learning sessions, whether it's live or videotape. And I hope you guys have a great evening. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.